All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast. Mitch Michals here. The show, as you all know by now, part of the Believe Network. Tons of great content, tons of great guests all across the tennis landscape as we enter into the end of the 2025 season. What a year it was. We are into bigger and better things on this show. We got a lot of people to talk to in the off season. I love to get the chance to talk to some people on the tennis bubble and people that are covering the game and people that we look at to get our media and news from. Nick Mccarvel joining the show. It's been quite a minute, Nick, but it's always a blast to talk to someone who working for the Olympics. I saw writing now added to your repertoire, but always good to have you on the Inside in Tennis podcast.
Oh, Mitch, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. Actually, full circle for me. Writing's where I started, and I'm back into that space. Yeah, for the Olympics, and dipped my toe into several different tennis events this year, which I know we'll talk about, but. I was telling you before we hit record, just congrats on all your success this podcast. I was looking at your guest list. I listened to a couple of the episodes recently, including with Nick Monroe. You're killing it. So thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. It speaks volumes of just the quality of people in the industry like yourself that are able to come on this show and tell different stories. And I'm just driving the bus. I'm just throwing up alley-oops, as they say. I do think though it's pretty cool though that you're balancing not just tennis but the Olympic side of things, the international competition, and I know you've covered figure skating and other sports, but I've been an Olympic fan my whole life, and just to see the international side of things, even when you get outside of tennis, is just really remarkable.
Yeah, it's been a great joy for me, and actually I owe my Olympic sort of quote unquote career to tennis, because I worked 2012. I did London from Connecticut. I didn't go to London, which would have been awesome, but I was the digital producer for tennis for NBC and worked with this guy, Dave Gobble, who's been a tennis guy forever, but he's still at NBC Olympics. And when we finished London, we're in this cycle now, Paris to Milano Cortina 2026. It's usually only like a year and a half or 20 months from a summer games to a winter games. And when we finished London, Dave reached out to me and was like, we need someone for Sochi like now. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I loved figure skating as a kid. Definitely for me as a queer person, that like really aligns with a lot of the huge gay fan base in figure skating. And I'm into my fourth Olympic cycle. I do a few different things for Olympics.com and Olympic Channel. But it's kind of been cool, Mitch, to like step outside of tennis and like get to see sort of the way that these different sports. I've done sport climbing and track and field and gymnastics and swimming and, just so many different sports. Figure skating is where I live mostly for the winter. But it's also interesting to compare and contrast all of our inner sort of like tennis, the things that we like to complain about in tennis, it's often being complained about elsewhere in big time sports.
Like officiating, replay review. I'm just naming a few off the top of my head. But
there you go.
You raise a good point though, in terms of how athletes operate as a journalist. And that's something I think you can speak to. You notice these athletes up close and you go to a different sport. It's some similarities, but a lot of differences in just how they operate and how they maybe ramp up for competition.
Yeah, you really do. And I mean, I also just have the greatest of respect for the athletes and the way that, whether it for us at the slams, at the Masters 1000s, looking at the pressure that these athletes face. But for me, like on the figure skating Grand Prix right now, there's always tension, and it's about, the coaching teams. And for a lot of these athletes, they get selected to go to events. It's not necessarily rankings. Sometimes it's rankings, but there's that piece of it. And then the Olympics, the Olympic season, like a couple weeks ago, we had the 100 Days Out media summit for Team USA here in New York. And, from biathlon to curling to alpine skiing, these athletes this is what they work so hard for. And, the figure skaters too, they do the Grand Prix series every season, but the Olympic year is when they really, the pressure is on for them. They have to deliver that one time. Whereas for tennis players, it's like you get 4 slams a year to really try to deliver your peak.
Yeah, always a fan of the Olympics. It's great to see everyone together. I do remember, and this might be a little personal sharing, but as a young kid getting Sports Illustrated for Kids, I had that Tara Lipinski photo as well. So the posters that used to come out. So I was locked in the Olympics at a very young age. So
do you have a favorite?
Very
do you have a favorite winter and summer sport? Like obviously beyond tennis.
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up playing hockey, so the ice hockey at the Olympics is just incredible. But if I was going to go outside of just my personal bias there, I actually really love the downhill skiing. Like, I just think it's great to watch how fast, like it's insane, like that they're going 70, 75 miles an hour and trying
crazy.
to do that. So
It's crazy.
for summer, I can't beat classic track and field. There's a buzz in the air when you're like the 100 meters about to take place, and you have the trials that took place. I was locked in maybe more than my whole life watching from Oregon, the U.S. trials this year too. So I can't go against track and field.
Yeah, no, track's awesome. I got to cover at Paris last year for the Olympics, and I will. So downhill skiing, I haven't done very much, but I did interview Lindsey Vonn recently, and that story is crazy. She's over 40. She's a huge tennis fan, right? Good friends with Jannik Sinner. I know she and Roger go way back. She's advised, I think, a lot of the tennis players. She and Maria Sakkari have spent some time together. But she's not just coming back, Mitch. She wants to win some medals in Cortina, which would be incredible for Lindsey Vonn.
Just whether it's Michaela Schifrin or other sport like Sydney McLaughlin. If you ever meet her, though, I'm gonna need to see some evidence of that, because it's unreal what she's doing.
Oh,
in
I've
her
interviewed
sport.
Sydney several times. I'll send you a pic after.
It's crazy. They're just dominant athletes, right? It's like watching watching Djokovic or Alcaraz and Sinner now. You just appreciate the greatness, and we'll see what ends up happening. But getting back to the tennis and where we are in this year, Nick, it's been an eventful year for a lot of different reasons. I think you can start with this, like the popularity. And I mentioned this on Monday's show when I was talking to somebody, but I do feel like there's a wave of enthusiasm across the board with tennis. It's gotten popular. People have said it's had a moment. I think it's been fair to say it's had moments in the past, but there's some sustained popularity increase that I've noticed. And I want to ask you the same question as someone that's covered the game a little longer than I have.
Yeah, hugely so. I mean, and I go back to I don't think you would know this, but some of my very first inklings in tennis was I contributed to this tennis blog called Tennis Served Fresh. And it was this, this is like Blogspot 2007, 8, 9, 10. And Erwin Ong originated it. He's still a friend of mine. But it really was the cross-section of culture and tennis. And there's always going to be crossovers, right? But 15, 17 years on, it does feel like, you look at brands like Racket Magazine and now the publishing industry, look at Challengers and the movie, there's just so many cultural touch points that the sport has really hit on. Serena is a one name icon, I think, globally, not just in the States. Venus probably right there too. Roger, Rafa, Andy, Novak, they've helped with that as well. But it's really interesting. I've got a couple of friends who are in the publishing world, and even they're talking about, there's just so much hunger for tennis content. And, you have someone like Chris Clarey, who just, put out his second book, which was the Rafa focus, interwoven with Roland Garros history. Michael Costa put out the comedian, the late night host and comedian. He put out his book about being out on the challenger circuit and that life. But I've got a few friends too who are working on fiction books in the tennis space, because there's just so much there's so much excitement around it, and I think that's cool. I think the sport needs that. Obviously we want champions to really look up to, but it's cool to see the way that the sport has kind of hit in these different cultural moments too.
That is really how you know that it's taking off, is the people that don't ever bring up tennis or bringing up tennis to you. Like, hey, have you noticed this and that? When obviously the answer is yes, but it's kind of cool that people outside the bubble. And I wonder too, with more brand focus, with players having their own voice, and we're seeing, in the fashion side, other companies get involved in tennis for the first time. I think the end road for me is that we're introduced to more depth of players. There's not just the top names are the ones we know. You're getting to know the personality of players that aren't as high ranked yet, or maybe won't get there, but still we know the depth of the game more than we did before.
Yeah, and I also think, let's credit people like, you look at Sam Querrey and the work that he's done with Sift Creative, the production company, and Nothing Major, and obviously Andy Roddick was Served. There is this... there's been this recent conversation around, what is tennis doing wrong? And I'm air quoting if you're listening to us. What is tennis doing wrong in terms of content and promotion? And, it's a space that you and I have worked in different ways of what is the best tennis content. And surely the sport can do better in a lot of different ways. But I also think I mentioned Sam because it felt like he really changed the game in terms of like, retires, but then like creates this whole new career for himself.
Did you know he was that funny? Because like that's the question. Like, and I was going to ask you actually something along these lines later, but whether it's Sam Querrey or whether it's in the player podcast like Players Box with the American women. But like I've been listening to that, and like I've been knowing Jen Brady a little bit. She's hilarious on that show. Like, did you know that these players, and maybe you did from behind the scenes, but the world didn't, that these players that seem like they're buttoned up have a lot of personality?
Yeah, well, that's kind of my point, right? Is that, and obviously it goes to a whole nother level. Like Sabalenka, has a whole YouTube series, and I think is working with a production company. And I heard that Taylor Townsend had like a specific person credentialed trying to get behind the scenes content in Riyadh, like all that kind of stuff, which I think the sport needs. And if the athletes are going to make as much cash as they are, they're investing in every other part of themselves. Like, why not invest in the way that especially young people are speaking and relating with each other, to a degree. Did I know that Sam Querrey and Jen Brady were funny people behind the scenes? Yeah. I mean, I don't know them that well. Yeah. But I've certainly, they're both these like but the podcast space, I think, lends well to that too, of like, like you look back at someone like Petkovic, or, Djokovic has done it sort of naturally, just sort of the like verbose, the way that they're able to be funny and people are drawn to them in that way. Sam Querrey and Jen Brady are more sort of deferential and quirky and sort of, they've got a different sense of humor, which I think the podcast space and social media now, I think that works better for that kind of humor.
I definitely think finding your voice is a part too, whether it's a foreign player that we take for granted a lot. They're not speaking their native language, so it can be overwhelming to get used to all this. As is the case if you're a player that's not a top player that has to grind to get to that point. You have other things to worry about. So I think we forget that it takes time to maybe find your voice. And, I'm obviously a fan of tennis like you are, and I think sometimes we highlight the negative more than the positive about where we are doing things right. And obviously you can always improve, Nick, but the only thing I don't like, the only attitude I don't like in general is gatekeeping of like, this is good, this is bad, where I think it's nice to have a space where people try new creative ideas, whether it's a podcast, whether it's content creation, and, let people kind of express themselves. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing for the players, no matter if someone wants to be the makeup tutorial person or someone wants to be the travel vlog person, or, Zizou Bergs did a lot of stuff as he was coming up, and now he's more of an established top player. So I like that too. I think the criticism can be launched towards the larger bodies, whether it's, media facing or the organizations of how do you continue to push yourself to be better. And, I think there's always challenges. There's more challenges behind the scenes, I think, than people often realize. But, the onus is on the sport to continue to evolve in the various media spaces that it's going to try to exist in over the next couple of decades. And how do we keep it relevant and engaging for people who who do, like say read a book or go to the movies or somehow touch base with the sport culturally. Then it's about, okay, how do we get them more tuned in to these athletes and their stories, whether there's humor there or heartbreak or whatever, hard work, like they're humans, and that's what people love. They love the cinematic connection in that way.
Well, that's a good segue naturally, because one of the new media, new ideas, which similar to you, I like when we try new things and experiment. I've been a fan of maybe more of any of your work, Nick, the cinema sessions in Australia. So how did that idea come to be, and what was it like? How is it the process of talking to these players, sometimes legends, getting them to let their guard down, sit on the couch, and eat some popcorn and watch highlights?
Yeah, so cinema sessions, Mitch, we did it the last couple of years at the Australian Open. I am sad to say it's not coming back for season 3, so that was out of my hands. Maybe I'll do a pop-up popcorn stand in Australia, but we did it for 2 years. Tennis Australia deserves all the credit for that. Shannon Anderson and a few of the production team at TA. But It just so like it at the Australian Open, there's this long hallway where they walk down
Right.
and they're literally doing all these interviews. So like on media day, it's crazy because they're doing Channel 9, they're doing World Feed, they're doing ESPN. They might be doing some of the, the European broadcasters, depending on who the player is. There's the Japanese broadcaster, etc. And Cinema Sessions was one of those stops. And it's funny though, because they're coming into these sets for the most part and they're like in a TV set and the players are used to that. And just the like literally us just like pulling that curtain back, and we literally would like pop fresh popcorn as often as we could so the smell would hit them right away, like we're rolling as they walk in. Yeah. And I will say, Mitch, that just the players now are so used to so many different photo shoots and collaborations and surprises and all this kind of stuff, but when something's done that well, and again that credit goes to Tennis Australia, of we had 4 different cameras in there, a producer, the footage is up. Like there was a smoke machine. I think they got in trouble a couple times with the building manager who was like, "You keep setting off the fire alarm."
Good
but like
it
all was worth it for the product, because then the players just kind of like curious. And at least for me, I'm a trusted enough, whether they know me well or at least they know my face, or they're like, "Oh, I've seen that guy before." Then for me sitting down and being like, "Hey, what's up? Like, welcome to the movies. We're gonna watch a movie of you today." And that's just like, for the most part, I'd say most of the players and legends that came through just super relaxed. And then like you say, they're watching footage of themselves, and that's like, even then I think of course they're gonna watch back matches from a like tactical perspective, but like sitting down with Madison Keys this year, like I think it was after her 4th round, she didn't know she was gonna win the tournament. Obviously we didn't know either. But she had, like we rolled the tape for her in Cinema Sessions, and the first match is her beating Venus in 2015. And she's like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen that. I've never seen any of this."
Right.
And so like, that's just cool because it disarms them. And it obviously then lends them to speak about a subject that they're really familiar with, which is themselves.
Yeah. I thought the time you got with Andre Agassi was great, and it's cool to see him back in the spotlight. And whether it's Cinema Sessions or other areas and publications, I think a lot of people forget just how tactically brilliant he is because of the impact he made culturally and what he meant to the game. But when he talks tennis, it's one of the sharpest people I've ever heard.
Yeah, it actually, like, it kind of, I'm not joking, it kind of spooked me. First of all, that was awesome. Like, there's, sometimes I'm not fazed anymore by, it's like, oh, Sabalenka's coming in, or Casper Ruud is next. It's like, okay, cool, like, I have a job to do. But with Andre, like, growing up in the 90s, I was Guga, Andre, and Monica. Like, those were my go-tos. And the crazy thing was, Mitch, is Andre, I'm not exaggerating, we would start a highlight clip and it would be like, 19 whatever, like one of his title runs, and he'd be like, "Oh, next shot, forehand down the line." And he had it
5 years ago.
Yeah, but it would be like but it was like, in the final against Arnaud Clement or whatever it was, and just that tactical brain and his. We've seen it now more, I think, in the last year or so, coming on at Laver Cup and really, I think, re-entering the tennis space anew. But that blew my mind, because sometimes players are like, "Oh, I have no idea." Like they're like, they apologize. They're like, "Oh, I have no idea," and I'm like, "Well, we don't care if you remember. Like, just watch it with us. Like, that's the enjoyment of it." But Andre, the recall was crazy.
His place in the game is unmatched, but it's just, and again, it's a bonus, right? These legends don't have to do anything. They've earned that right to walk away if they want to. But I think I speak for all of tennis when it's like, we're glad he's back and in the mix, and will be Laver Cup and in other ways for years to come.
Yeah, it's been, the reemergence of Andre Agassi. It should be studied, actually, in a lot of ways, because it's like from Laver Cup to his U.S. Open appearances, ad campaigns, that kind of stuff. It's just great to have, the sport, and I agree with you. I respect a decision like a Pete, an Andre, a Steffi, Capriati, some of these great champions who really have stepped away. That's their point. But I think especially for Americans, like, we lost a little bit generationally as a sporting culture with Agassi and Sampras both really stepping away. So it's been really cool to see Andre come back and do so in a way of like, you know, playing alongside Joao Fonseca at the exhibition at the US Open. Like that kind of stuff is really, really cool.
It really is. It's just been a joy to see. More with Nick Mccarvel here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, talking to the broadcaster journalist about the tennis season, ins and outs of what's going on across the landscape and the sport in general. And Nick, you're also someone I can talk to about covering all 4 majors. Getting the chance to do that is obviously a blessing, but with the experience that you've had now, have you noticed the differences of, and if you could elaborate on how different maybe each tournament is and the experiences you've had, maybe good and bad, but also just how different they are at each major?
I think that they've gotten, you know, I did my first like real round of the majors in like 2012, 13, 14. So, you know, that's about 15 years, 10 to 15 years. And I would say that they've become more different, more singular in themselves and their identities, Mitch, than ever before. Now it really feels like that. I did the French Open Roland Garros this year for the first time since 2019, since the pre-pandemic. So a lot of expansion there, but just the further sort of like, it also is the geography too. Like, you know, the Australian Open is just a stone's throw from the city's center. You know, like players oftentimes can walk from their hotels, whereas the French Open is in this like kind of on the outskirts of Paris in this residential area. We obviously know Wimbledon, SW19, it's quite fancy. The US Open and its chaos in Flushing. And so I think that they've each leaned into their identities more. And I think that that's really actually helped. I would say that's probably helped the sport overall, that we've got these 4 mountaintops, and the fact that these majors feel different in that way. Now there are pluses and minuses to that. You know, like some people feel like the US Open crowd is disrespectful because they're too loud, or the you know, it's annoying that the French show up late to Chatrier or whatever the complaints might be. But it feels as though the majors are now like unapologetically themselves.
They've gone uniquely themselves, like the Australian Party Slam. It certainly lives up to it, and I'm with you there. I think it's good, and that's like the bigger picture question that we've had and debated when you hear about crowd noise, for example. I think it's good to have some variety. Like if you want to, like a Wimbledon crowd is good for Wimbledon, but it doesn't mean everybody has to adhere to just buttoned up, no noise, no nothing there. So I like uniqueness again. I think that's a good thing. We've got 4 unique slams.
Well, and I think I actually really agree with that. Like, I think it challenges the players in different ways too, right? Like center court, Wimbledon, it's going to keep that tradition really until perhaps the tournament decides to change that culture. Whereas the US Open really encourages the party vibes, you know? And I would say too, like I was courtside a lot at the end of the US Open inside Ash doing radio, and as the tournament went on, people were more locked into the matches. So that was interesting too, of like the first week or so, like people are there to have a honey deuce, to have a good time,
or
to
3.
watch some, exactly, or 4, and then have a good time. But I think, you know, as the tournament went, people got more locked in on the tennis, which was cool to see. And I think it probably changed the atmosphere. I'm going to be curious too. Like the USCA is doing big construction on Ash. Like they're changing the suites in the lower bowl, and so it'll feel different. I think courtside, the structure of the arena is not changing. I don't know if you knew this, but they're shifting the way that the feel is going to be on court. And from a person who's held a microphone inside Arthur Ashe Stadium and attempted to speak to 23,000 people, it is a tough acoustic venue. Yeah. So I'm curious to know if they're doing anything to shift those acoustics, and if so, what they are to, because
it's got that low murmur, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't, watching it on television, it seems like there's just people talking nonstop, which maybe there are, but it's also just how the noise reverberates up, which you've seen from arenas too. So it's a good tidbit. I'm not sure either.
I think it was Gary Nathan wrote this like really, I think it was even just like a blurb or something on one of his outlets, but the tennis reporter who's got the new Sinner Alcaraz book, Gary Nathan, just about how like it's a weird like sound vacuum that exists in Ash. But those things matter, right? You know, when you talk about entertainment and like people having a good time and music and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I love that the slams have become vastly even more different. Over the last 10 years.
Was that U.S. Open duty this year? The radio stuff, was that the whisper role, as it's known? Is that the job you had?
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I mean, oh man, it's like, I don't know, Mitch. I've gotten to do some pretty great, you know, like we were just talking about cinema sessions. Like, it'd be hard for me to pick my like number one, but like, I was whisper, you know, courtside for radio. I pretty much that was pretty much my role. I did a few other things for the U.S. Open this year, but like the team, Patty Fallick and her team run the radio product, you know, the streaming radio that goes out on the app and usopen.org, and Jim Knapp from Live Sports Radio, his team produces all of it, and it's just so it's just that piece of, and I think it'll be interesting to see sort of how tennis also evolves in these kind of spaces of like, you know, commentary is valid and it is a value add. Like I know that you have commentators on all the time. I myself have commentated, but the differentiation of like, you know, being able to be in that space and have more time to speak to, obviously, you know, my parents are my parents, but they love listening to the radio and watching the TV on mute. And I think actually a fair amount of people do that. It just allows more of a conversational feel, I think, with the product and with fans.
Is that a different voice for you when you're whispering? Because I've always wanted to know that with broadcasters.
You mean literally my voice?
Yeah. You change it up.
Sometimes it's, sometimes it's a like real whisper, like, oh, I mean, there's not in Ash. I've never worried about,
because would you be worried about the players or somebody hearing? Like, is that the big thing?
I'm worried because like you've got the headphones on. Like I'm wearing like a full pack, but I'll oftentimes leave one ear open so that I can actually hear what I sound like to the venue. But the ATP used to have a radio product, and I did the finals a couple times at the O2 as the whisper position, and I definitely a couple times was like, can they hear me? Like, it just is your worst nightmare to obviously, like, you know, for someone to be like, look at you and be like, shut up, like I can
make
hear
a point
you.
about someone and they're looking at you. That'd be my nightmare. But I mean, the experiences and the unique part of it's got to be the fun stuff. As you know, I know you've covered this before, but being at Roland Garros this year for the Rafa tribute, for really what was, and it doesn't happen much, Nick, the seismic like bookends of tennis eras, that was one of them. Rafa gets the perfect tribute at Roland Garros. It signifies the changing of the guard, the end of an era. Just a special thing to watch, as I'm sure it was in person to be there.
Man, I love each of your questions because I'm like, what's Mitch gonna ask me next? And you're reminding me, like, I had an awesome year. Yeah, I mean, so I hosted this daily YouTube show called From Paris with Clay, and it was produced in part by Whisper, a production company from London, in conjunction with the FFT. But yeah, I mean, so I was in Chatrier, but like high up in one of the broadcast positions. And man, did the FFT just do like the absolute best job with that ceremony. Like the t-shirts that everyone had inside the arena, it was packed, obviously. I can tell you, like, the feeling of support for Rafa that day was insane. The fact that you had the big four was all there, Rafa's kid, it just like, and it was fitting, right? Like he deserved, I mean, Rafa deserves endless accolades for what he changed the history of our sport. And you know, I don't like to say that it'll never happen again, because it could, but what he accomplished, obviously, and then the footprint at the end was just like, and the way that they like had one of the groundskeepers, you know, one of the court attendants, and it just was it was the deserved send off, I think, that Rafa, that he had earned for himself.
Right.
And did you see the part where they brought out like all the different tournament doctors that had like helped keep his body right? I mean, that was like, come on. Like they didn't need to take, and I'm forgetting her name. I actually met Sarah was one of our producers for that show, and she introduced me to the woman who helps run those ceremonies. You know, you imagine all the bells and whistles that go into that. And I mean, hats off to that team to create that moment, because it was kind of like, well, what is this going to be? You know, like how do we? And it also sort of reminded me or brought to light a bit more of like Roger's send off at Laver Cup was amazing, but it wasn't, you know, like would Wimbledon ever do something like that for Roger? Like not really. Like that's not really Wimbledon style, but yeah, that was so damn. Real, I mean, did you consume it in a way that felt like it was as cool as it felt on the ground?
Yeah, I didn't have the highest expectations, I'll be honest, given
exactly.
not just the past that tributes have had in tennis. Rafa's tribute at the Davis Cup left a lot to be inspired the year before. I was blown away. The devil was in the details, like you mentioned. The drama, like the slow reveal of the big three being other big four members being there, of the footprints on the court, and I'll be honest, Nick, seeing that moment get to Rafa, because he never really gave you that much of, you know, himself and the connection he had at the perfect place, right? Roland Garros. I was blown away by it. And I think it speaks volumes to just, you know, how much he meant to the sport, which in my opinion, you don't have to say it. I will. I don't think it'll ever happen again. I think it's the most unbreakable record in sports.
Yeah, sure.
14 Roland Garroses.
The other thing I thought was so cool about that, and this is again respect to Rafa, is then Rafa walked away. Like he wasn't at Roland Garros for the rest of the tournament, and obviously we know he's going to be back in the future, right? Like
Roger said he hasn't picked up a racket like that. He is completely walked away, like hasn't really played tennis.
Rafa, you know? Or Roger.
Roger said that about Rafa. I believe it was on Served on Roddick's podcast, but you know, and I don't know how much of that's entirely true, but like he walked away, as you said.
Yeah, and I mean it as well in the sense of like he wasn't like a guest of the president. He wasn't in the box. Like he wasn't at sponsor stuff. And I respect that, like, you know, having that ceremony, honoring Rafa, and then him being like, see you guys, I'm going back to Mallorca and I'm going to let this tournament be, you know, a lot of people were like, well, what's Roland Garros going to be without Rafa? I mean, I think Coco, Aryna, Jannik, and Carlos proved that the tournament's going to be just fine moving forward.
So fitting, right? So perfect that we get the Sinner Alcaraz match at that same tournament, the bookend, because there's still people talking about that. Like, we can talk about the rivalry and the gap between the field, but there's still people talking about that match.
Oh, that match was... I was with my camera crew and we were kind of filming like different... We were like, oh, like, let's do a like watch along, you know, and we have to like, the idea for the segment had to be ready before the match. So I was like, oh, let's go to like, we'll go to a couple different vantage points and I'll check in on camera or whatever for this edited reel. And, you know, the match is like 5 hours deep. And one of my producers was like, where do we go next? And I was like, you know, who cares? Like, whatever the angle is, like, we just need to be there and like feel the emotion. Wow, that match was, and the way that afternoon sort of evolved and people left and came back. And I oftentimes have a hard time with 5-set tennis. Like, I just feel like we're shooting ourselves in the foot of like these, as we try to modernize continuously, like those, they're just too long. But like, that was one of the rare instances where I was like, okay, like five sets. Yes. Like this deserved it.
I find it so impressive with those two that not only they are, you know, taking the mantle and elevating the game and doing it as statesmen, but, you know, that latter point being they are embracing their roles as top players. There's not a lot of baggage. There's a lot of respect both between them and with them in the tennis community. They have assumed the mantle of top players and what it means, Nick, and it goes well beyond just playing as a tennis player. It's being that representative off the court.
And it is crazy how fast it's happened, right? I mean, it's just been Yeah, they've blasted themselves into this other galaxy, and it's no disrespect to the other guys. I think that most of the top guys, right now in Turin would agree with us that they've just like through the rivalry, through their accomplishments. But you're right. I think they've taken it all in stride, which is not easy to do. I mean, the demand for these two guys, even just in their home countries, is crazy. Both Sinner and Alcaraz have become household names in Spain and Italy. And then the way that they've elevated our sport sort of in that come up has been awesome to watch.
And I just don't think people realize the mental strain that goes on you when the expectations are so high that it's like, okay, you enter a tournament, win it, or it's a failure. It's a lot to deal with for anyone, let alone people, early 20s, early stages of adulthood.
I wonder, do you think we're going to see more of, because Alcaraz, I guess it'll be interesting to see how they evolve as people. Like, Sinner is so, like, cards close to the chest. Like, even with Rybakina winning in Riyadh last week for the WTA finals, I covered that match for the Olympics, just writing a couple pieces on it.
Yeah.
It didn't, like, take away from the moment, but it's hard to, like, really see what something means to someone and I'm not criticizing Rybakina. I'm seeing and saying, yeah. I mean, when you're kind of like, you smirk and you're like, I just won the biggest prize money in women's tennis history. Like, that's, the point is, though, I'm curious to see how Sinner and Alcaraz, as their careers go, how did they relate to the public in different ways, Sinner and the way that he's had to navigate this doping situation, and there's still a lot of negativity and vitriol, I think, for him on tour, and I think that maybe has even closed him off even more. But as they go, how are they going to sort of show us more layers of who they are? And they're going to become different people over the years too, which I think that's what makes our sport also unique, is that you get those sort of personal journeys.
Well, if the best rivalries in all sports have contrast, whether it's style or just makeup and everything. So I think it's great where we are with these two. Game certainly in good hands. A couple more things with Nick Mccarvel here on the Inside in Tennis podcast as we wind down the 2025 season with the broadcaster, writer, and we get into some things. I did want to mention the women's game because the drama was exciting start to finish. Madison Keys wins the first slam of the year in Australia. Rybakina bookends it with the WTA finals title. You had a lot in between, though. You had Coco winning RG. You had Ego at Wimbledon, Sabalenka, U.S. Open. You're at number one. So many good storylines, Nick, across the top. And, dare I say, one of the ones I think that maybe the top was the reemergence of Anisimova, because her year was just iconic in a lot of ways. And I'm really, really hoping and wishful that she'll be at the top of the game for a long time now.
Yeah, what a bounce back from, obviously to get to the Wimbledon final the way that she did, but then to lose it in that sense. And I remember actually watching her Instagram stories. I think she came up to the Hamptons, or I don't know, maybe if she went down to Florida, but she was with her family somewhere on a beach. And I just was thinking about, like, wow, how is she going to come back after this? And she has. And Anisimova, I remember one of my first gigs at the U.S. Open, I was a court announcer on Grandstand, and 2017 girls final was Anisimova against Coco Gauff. And the buzz that day was, these are going to be two future superstars. Now, obviously, Coco, I mean, Anisimova, let's give her credit, obviously has been through so much personally, the loss of her father. She was a Grand Slam semifinalist 2 years later in 2019, beating Simona Halep at the French Open. But to watch her come up and the way that she came back, Mitch, after, basically stepping away from the game, I just can't respect it more. And she's also enough of like the Gen Z sort of like everything's kind of understated, and there's not a lot of sort of like emotion in terms of like, it's not outwards, like it's not her sort of like go-to. So that's more close to the vest. But man, she has, that title in Beijing, making the finals, the US Open final run. And she was hugely disappointed in New York, right? And so I think for her, 2026, you just feel like the expectations are there. And I think the dangerous thing for the rest of the women, when you look at this, like, top of the game of Sabalenka, Coco, Gauff, Swiatek, Pagula, Anisimova, Rybakina. Anisimova now is certainly part of that conversation.
Yeah.
And when she's firing on all cylinders, she is lethal.
Yeah, it's, and the Gen Z thing I did notice too. She got Tim Henman on her TikTok. So, I mean, she's just
good.
Talk about a crowning achievement. Now, it's really, really impressive. I mean, what she's done. And yeah, at the top of the game, you named the top 6 right now, and they're all just insanely good. Every match Sabalenka plays seems like it's an instant classic, and she usually wins them. Iga just finished 4 straight years in the top 2, and I looked this up before we started. Only Serena this century on the WTA, so
no way.
Rarefied air there. Yeah, it's been pretty impressive. She won Wimbledon, so I know it didn't happen at the end of the year. In RG, there was disappointment, but I'm going to go on record and say any year you win Wimbledon is a good season.
I mean, yeah, and I know you had Wim Facette on recently. If you guys missed that episode, go back and listen to it because he's so interesting talking about, because they're really different, Wim and Iga. That Wimbledon run was, and like everyone telling her she couldn't play on grass and her admitting that she didn't like it. And, the sort of like, there were all these sort of like hot takes on, what's happened to Iga after she loses at the French Open. And I just, all this stuff where I, just had to feel like so satisfying in a sense for that team to win the biggest title in tennis. I mean, still Wimbledon is the one, right?
It is. And yeah, Wim actually, it was fascinating listening to him as a coach. Like, she said Iga didn't really have confidence on the grass. Like she didn't really enjoy it, but he looked at it like, I got a lot of room to coach here. Like, this is her worst surface. Let me get in there and actually coach. Like, he was excited about it, and it paid off. And yeah, with the changes at the top, with Coco working on her serve and still just one of the best competitors, it's going to be very hard for players to break through these top 5 or 6 and get to the top of the mountain. But we'll see if there's new faces. One of them might be Victoria Mboko, who finished the year top 20 with the title and really adjusted to the fame and expectations of becoming an overnight sensation after winning Canada.
Oh my God, the Mboko, the only negative out of that Montreal title was that it just came too close to the US Open where she was injured and it would have been so cool to see her. Maybe we'll see when she's going to have a run at a major, not if. My sleeper of among these women is Mirra Andreeva, and she wins Indian Wells. She has a great sort of first quarter of Q1 2025. She's trending up. People are investing. If you're trading in tennis stock, but I think that from the Boisson moment at the French Open, Belinda Bencic, she came out really flat at Wimbledon, and then it was Taylor Townsend who beat her at the U.S. Open amidst Taylor's incredible run. I think Andreeva had a lot of learning this year, and I think that she is going to come back because she's still 18, right? Andreeva, or she's still 17. So anyway,
Andreeva is 18,
18. Okay. So I just think that and again, those aren't criticisms, but I think that she's going to launch herself back into the conversation of like, okay, I've been to the top. I want to now compete for these, because we haven't seen her, aside from she made the 2024 French Open semis, we haven't seen her really in the conversation at the bookend of a major.
It's been some tough losses, but yeah, the youth movement is pretty strong on both tours, whether it's someone like a young Iva Jovic American, or, I mean, if Eala keeps winning, as far as popularity blows up, I mean, that's just tough to beat, given her fans. But that's exciting to see where we go.
Yeah, and that's been interesting for me from an Olympic perspective, because, you look at like singular athletes like the Philippines and the support that Eala has gotten. Like, she'd be one of the athletes that we'd follow the closest for the Olympics when she's not necessarily just because of that national appeal from an Olympic platform. Which is great to see.
Whether it's podcast hosts or journalists, they're all vested in Eala doing well for the numbers, because there's a lot of numbers behind her success. Right. So she's got a lot of fans in the media. Yeah. Well, last thing I have for you, Nick Mccarvel, always a blast when we get to talk tennis and other things, but working with the Hall of Fame, which I know has been special to you, and getting to be part of the fabric of the great history of the game. And maybe you can answer the question: did we reinforce security yet for Federer's induction next year? Have we called in the extra forces there?
I don't know, man. But how about like Serena? How about the Serena Maria moment? I mean, that moment.
Yeah.
And I will say I was working with and for the Hall of Fame at induction weekend. And maybe a few minutes before the ceremony, there was a couple whispers of like, we think someone's here. So
So
they
no
kept,
one knew. So no one
I
really
mean,
knew, like on the outside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they knew. Yeah, and I will say, I'll, the Hall of Fame is put in a tough position with the way that the calendar is shaken out, and obviously wanting people to, come to Newport and experience. If you've never been, you have to go to that venue. It's incredible. But I loved, myself, Blair Henley. We were part of the presenting team. They did a celebrity tennis match with Roddick and Blake, and they had people like Angela Kinsey come in from sort of the celebrity side. I think they really did a good job of trying to shift that programming for 2025 and beyond. And it was cool to see that sort of for Maria and the Bryan brothers. And then it's going to be a huge, next 5 years with the Hall of Fame, and looking at Roger and Rafa. And I would imagine, that obviously the ballots have to be cast, but we'll see how it unfolds. But Serena, Venus is probably ineligible for a while because she keeps playing tennis.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's going to be a great couple of years for tennis fans and fans of a certain era. But I love the fact that the Tennis Hall of Fame the International Tennis Hall of Fame was able to pivot out of necessity. Bringing women's tennis back to the grass courts is crucial too, but finding a new place among a crowded, insanely crowded tennis schedule and giving the fans something to look forward to. It's cool to see these players, these legends, take their rightful place in history.
Yeah, and I thought it was a good mix of actually in Newport that weekend for the induction ceremony, it was different, but it was a good mix of summer tourists, people who were there, they're like, oh, this is cool to do, and tennis diehards. And I think then it's up to the Hall of Fame to try to continue to draw people in. We had a lot of different activations. But you have to try new things, and you have to feel like you're trying to take things in different directions to see how it's gonna unfold.
Well, Nick, this has been fun. It always is. What do you got
Mitch.
going up on the next couple months? Anything we should know about here on the show?
I mean, I'm pretty geared into the Winter Olympics. You can find my coverage on Olympics.com and our platforms. A lot of figure skating in my life recently, which I'm pumped for. And then, looking hopefully back in Melbourne and Indian Wells. Those would be probably my first two stops. Charleston's always a favorite. But Mitch, it's always a great time to chat with you, and congrats on you've had an awesome lineup of guests. So I appreciate you having me on.
Means a lot, Nick. It really does. I'm just somebody here talking to cool people in tennis. I got the easy job.
We like it, Mitch.
nerding out. But Nick Mccarvel, all the best. Really appreciate you coming on the show, taking time. Thanks for joining the Inside in Tennis podcast. Can't wait to do it again.
Thanks, Mitch.
That was Nick Mccarvel. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeart, or Amazon Music. Inside in Tennis podcast, just search it. It comes right up. You can subscribe, leave a nice rating or review if you're so kind, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for full video episodes with Nick Mccarvel and all of our outstanding guests. So on behalf of Nick Mccarvel, everybody else that's been supporting the show, we appreciate it. My name is Mitch Michals. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.